Hello everyone, I'm Ben Ando from Revolution Trains and this is Mike Hale.
Hello.
And what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 little videos for the Engage Forum virtual exhibition. This is the first one, and in it we're going to talk to you about how we came to start Revolution Trains, what the story was behind that, talk a little bit more about how we've gone on to develop the business, what our, goals are, what we're trying to achieve here, and also say thanks to everybody for helping us along the route, because we couldn't have done it without the Engage modelers joining us in producing some of these fantastic models. So thanks very much. So Mike, do you remember how we first started chatting to each other about this?
Yeah, Revolution first came about from a discussion on our own web about producing a Pendolino. And it very quickly became clear that we needed someone to sort of step up and organise a project if we were going to make it happen. And whether it was smart or foolish, you and I volunteered and ended up talking to a couple of manufacturers about how we could take it forward. So this was back in August 2014. We decided on a manufacturer that made it as realistic as possible, and that was ultimately Rapido Trains of Canada. Then we started thinking about some of the practicalities and realised that if we were going to do this, we had to set up a company, and we came up with the name of Revolution Trains, which was suggested by a friend of ours, Bernard Taylor of TPM fame.
Yeah, thanks Bernard for that. I was looking through some of my emails just before we recorded this to have a look, and I found one where Mike and I had started chatting, and the initial premise was we're both Engage enthusiasts and we both like modelling the West Coast Main Line in the sort of the present day era roughly. And there wasn't a model of the Pendolino, and it was quite clear that Pendolino was problematic because there are I think 5 or 6 different body shells in the train. It's a long train, 9 or 11 coaches if you want to be realistic, and of course in Engage the joy is that you can have full length trains. And we'd looked at various ways of doing this, and it was clear that unless you're going to sell around about 1,000 models at around about I think £250–300 each, it wasn't going to fly. But at that time, sort of 6 years ago, people were talking about Kickstarter as a way of modelling communities coming together to make things happen, to show manufacturers in effect that there was a market. I don't really know if we ever expected it to fly. We went through the process, and I remember that November, Mike we went to Worley, didn't we? We were handing out leaflets to people and
unsuspecting
begging
public.
them to have some faith. And I have to say, the people we spoke to, and I can still remember some of their faces now. People we saw, Mike and Dave, for example, who came up to us, and one of them was an O-gauge modeler. I said, well, I'd be interested in this. I think I really like the idea of supporting this project. And we were really surprised at how enthusiastic people were, and I think it was a timing thing. I think there was a zeitgeist element there. We were sort of just in the right place at the right time with the right idea, and just maybe got a little bit lucky. But also, Pendolinos are the signature train of the West Coast Main Line, from introduced in the early 2000s to the present day. Yep. And if Engage wants to be taken seriously as a scale, you need to be able to have these models available so people coming into it can think, yeah, I can get that. Now, the difficulty we have, of course, is the way we operate, pre-orders largely, means that it's not like you can rush out and buy this stuff from an average model shop. And that's the sort of the bridge, if you like, that I suppose we're still trying to cross.
Yeah, this is very much from the beginning of how Revolution started, that with Kickstarter effectively gave us a 2-month period to try and corral as many people interested as possible. And the idea was at the end of the 2-month period, if you'd met your funding goal, the project went ahead and all the money was realised. If you didn't, that was the end of it. So we set a fairly ambitious goal of raising £210,000, which would have been enough to produce, I think, 800 sets of Pendolinos. And in return for that, we gave people what would turn out to be a very discounted price versus a sort of standard manufacturer's recommended retail price.
It's interesting, that kind of pricing model is something we've pretty much stuck with.
Yeah.
Even though, spoiler alert, we failed, by the way, the Kickstarter didn't succeed.
Yeah, we got to just over 194,000 of that £210,000 goal. But fortunately, because we'd been talking to Rapido Trains, and particularly Jason Tron of Rapido Trains, Jason had a huge amount of faith in what we'd already managed to achieve, and came to us and said, look, if we got close enough to the goal, he was prepared to essentially underwrite the project and go ahead with it. And that's exactly what happened. So we came to the end of January 2015, narrowly missed the goal, but we were already in a position to be able to say to people, we've got a plan B. If we don't meet the target, which we didn't, we can still go ahead with this.
That was
that's exactly what happened.
I think my recollection is that it was a Sunday night that the Kickstarter came to an end. I don't know how many people watching this now were members of Engage Forum and RM Web at the time, but it was really kind of, you know, we were constantly refreshing the page. I think it was finishing at about 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, and refreshing the page and watching the total go up and watching the total go up and getting closer and getting closer and getting closer. I mean, it was, and I had people messaging me, and, you know, obviously you were watching it, I was watching it, and a whole bunch of people were kind of keeping across where that total was, and it just didn't quite make it. But in a weird way, I'm not totally heartbroken about that, because, you know, Kickstarter would have taken a whole load of fees out of the project, and in the end, because Jason came in with Plan B, we didn't need to, so we got going.
Yeah, and I think that was an important learning point for us, that although crowdfunding is something we've carried on using, and it's something we're very proud of using, because we do feel it helps bring people into projects. It was something that we realised that Kickstarter and other sort of established crowdfunding sites weren't perhaps tailored for model manufacturing, and therefore we realised that actually we could do something ourselves, that we could create our own mechanism to do this. And as Ben says, that's very much been the way that we carried on with all our projects. We reward people who back us from the start.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got essentially a sort of three-tier pricing system, where we have what we call our early bird offers, which were the cheapest price anyone ever gets anything at, and that's for probably the first 6 to 8 weeks of a project. Then after that we have our sort of standard crowdfunding price, and then after that we offer it to retailers who obviously need to make their own margin on projects, and so we add a retail margin onto the top of that.
And I mean, going back, of course, it's also perhaps worth reminding ourselves as much as everybody else that Kickstarter was all kind of under Engage Pendolino. It was after that we created the Revolution brand, when we came in with the first sort of new product, which was the big Engage 100-ton tankers, the TEAs, which actually came out before the Pendolino at the end, because Pendolino took a long time to make. It's a complicated model, and the tankers, which were also made by Rapido, came out before they did, and I think that was a real thrill for me, because if we move on to sort of when those models came out, which was probably around the middle of 2016, was it that sort of time? Roughly that sort of time. So we sort of stepped forward a year and a half now. And it was when, I remember when they came in, and they sort of all arrived, they had to go to my dad's garage at his house, about, you know, a couple of pallet loads of these things. I stacked them all up in order, and Mike came up and we started sending them out. You know, we were packing them up and sending them out to people. And just seeing videos of them on people's layouts, seeing comments on the forums about them, it was just so rewarding, wasn't it? Just fantastic.
Absolutely. I mean, the Pendolino almost felt like a sort of mammoth project, which it was in itself, but I think the TAs were the first time that we realised that there was a sort of the genesis of something longer lasting, and that people supported us with the TEA tanks before they'd even seen the Pendolino arrive, and that was incredibly rewarding, as Ben says, where when people started to get those models, and we physically had our first model on the shelves. And the Pendolino took a lot longer to develop than I think anyone anticipated, partly because it's a long train, partly because we were trying to introduce some innovative new features to do with powered couplings, etc.
Absolutely, and I mean, so going forward from that, the tankers arrived, and we could clearly see that there was a sort of a niche position for us, where we could look at projects that might not necessarily attract the mainstream manufacturers, but if there was enough interest, we could get them over the line and into production. And we then launched a couple more projects at the Engage show, the International Engage show, Kings, that year. And one of them was the Class 321 unit, and those are in production now and should be arriving very soon. And the other one was a Class 29 locomotive,
Yes.
but that was a failure. And I think it's important that we mention the failures, because it is important that we can't just do everything, and we certainly can't do things without the support of customers and about people who want to back us and support us. And so, I mean, the Class 29, I thought when we came up with the idea, it'd be a really good little locomotive to do. The Dapple Class 22 was really nice. It's a Scottish locomotive. It's kind of fugly. It's ugly but cute at the same time. Really useful for those transition areas. Yes, the real locomotives were a complete disaster, but it's kind of always had that kind of, I don't know, niche appeal, I think. And I thought it was going to do really, really well, but it was a complete failure, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the sort of the balancing acts we face with a lot of our projects, that we're trying to go for things that perhaps are not as commercially attractive to some of the larger manufacturers, but at the same time still commercially attractive enough to actually make them happen. And that was a real learning point for us again, that we can't just say we're going to produce something and expect everything to happen. The reality is that there's a lot of work that goes into every project that we do. Even just in preparing sort of basic publicity material takes a lot of time. And I think there was an assumption that if you build it almost that they will come, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And so I think that was important for us to learn that early on.
And we did. And I mean, how many models is it we've done now? We've done. In terms of powered models, we've had the Class 92 electric locomotive, obviously the Pendolino, the 320 and 321 units are very close, and in terms of coaching stock, we've got the Mark 5s at sample stage, and obviously lots and lots of wagons. We've done transition era wagons like the Class B tankers and the Sturgeons. We've done modern era wagons like the big tankers, Drax biomass hoppers, container flats.
We've had 14 models to date, and we've got another 25 announced models on the go.
Wow, so that's quite a lot of stuff coming on. So I think that wraps it up for sort of little revolution history lesson. There are going to be a couple more videos coming from us. In one of them we're going to just run you through in a pretty short sort of 9 or 10 minute video exactly what goes into producing one of these models, how we choose it, how we develop it, how we refine it, and then how we test it before obviously you guys get it. And then we're going to do a third video where we're going to run through some of the products we've done, talk about some of their features, and also possibly announce something new. So join us for those, and nice to see you.